Hello history fans and welcome back to the podcast that helps you learn a little bit of history. So the new Gladiator film's out and I'll be honest, I've not seen either of them, but I thought we could still make a video about gladiators in ancient Rome and have a look at some of the characters specifically too. I had a little Google and the first film has Emperor Commodus and Marcus Aurelius in, so we're definitely good talking about them. They're real ancient Roman emperors. And then the rest of the film, Google tells me, is about the Roman general Maximus Decimus Meridius, who is betrayed when Commodus murders his father and seizes the throne of Rome. Throne of Rome? Yeah. So he's then reduced to slavery and becomes a gladiator and rises through the ranks, determined to avenge the murders of his family and the emperor. Obviously, he's not a real person, but we can see if there's anyone from ancient Rome that he may have been influenced by. And there's lots of theories on who he may be, so we can explore them together. We'll start with the facts though, shall we? The context and the history of gladiators. Before we do though, of course, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel or follow the podcast. Cool, thank you. The film, I think, is set in the year 180, but gladiators have been about since much before then. The gladiator combats happened mainly during the Empire era of Rome, but they started in 105 BCE and ended in 404 CE, which was when the official contests were. The gladiator fights were one of the many things that the Romans took from their predecessors in Italy, the Etruscans. Originally, their gladiator fights were religiously significant as the rites of death, but then the first privately organised gladiator contests were in 264 BCE to commemorate the death of a father. Later, that element wasn't needed as much, so the fights were just for fun and entertainment, rather than having a fight to avenge a father, or because my friend's died, please let's have a gladiator fight to commemorate his life. Fallen or injured gladiators would still be finally killed, they wouldn't just be left injured. And that's when the religious origins are still sort of in mind, because an attendant dressed as Hermes, the messenger god who escorts souls to the underworld, would come in and strike the final blow to the loser. Then they became a chance for the emperor to show off their wealth. Some used it to distract the people of the empire from the empire's problems, or to celebrate military victories, or visits from very important people. They were held in huge arenas, built specifically for the events, like the Flavian amphitheatre that you probably know as the Colosseum, which was the biggest of them all. They would have been full of the public, drawn to the events, because it was so entertaining, the threat of life or death and the bloody goriness. The gladiators were mostly slaves or prisoners of war, because the fights would be to the death. But they wouldn't have hailed the emperor before a fight, saying, "Hail, Emperor, we who are about to die salute you." But instead that might have been said by the prisoners before the recreation of naval battles that took place for extra special occasions. Like I said, most gladiators were slaves, criminals or prisoners of war, which did make me wonder why they were the celebrities of their day, so much so that people bought their sweat for good luck and as an aphrodisiac. But it turns out, as well as those people, there were bankrupt aristocrats or people scouted by agents essentially. Imagine travelling the empire just to find people to convince them to be a gladiator. That's a pretty tough job. They would then go to gladiator schools with barracks set up throughout the empire to help keep up with such a high turnover. But they did also have the best possible medic while they were there though, so I guess they wanted to keep them going as much as they could. And interestingly, women were allowed to fight as gladiators until Septimus Severus outlawed them in the year 200. Speaking of celebrity status, they also had affairs with aristocratic women, and there's graffiti that survives of them telling us certain opinions of gladiators. Like at Pompeii, one was described as the barmaid's choice, or one man was the delight and sighed for joy of girls. They actually even would have endorsed products in the arena, like essentially doing ads, but apparently they left that out of Gladiator because they thought audiences wouldn't believe it. Gladiators were put into various different groups according to their weapons and armour. Their name comes from the Latin gladiator, as the principal weapon they would have been using was a short gladius sword. So the word means swordsman. The Samnite was the most heavily armoured gladiator, with a single gladius, the short sword, or a lance and a big square scutum shield, which is probably the one I think that's the big red one that you sort of immediately picture as a Roman. They're named after the Samnite warriors that Rome fought and defeated in the Republic period. And the word was actually used as a synonym for gladiator at the start of the competitions. The Murmillo, or fishman, wore a similar styled armour to the Samnite, but with padding on one arm and one leg. They had a short sword and a scutum shield too. The Thracians, or the Thracian, or the Thracian gladiators had curved daggers called sicca, and a small square round shield, or palma, that they held with their fist. And the Retiarius used a large net and a trident, but they had no armour other than a padded shoulder. They're the 4 principal classes of gladiators, but of course there's others, like the Hoplomachus, who had a small round shield and a short sword, which apparently Maximus is in the films, or the Esidarius, who rode chariots, and they also had some who were boxers or archers, and the Bestiari fought against animals. But, like I said, some of the fights were reenactments of popular battles on special occasions, which is fun. And to make the games more exciting, they would fight in different combinations. So quicker, less armoured gladiators would be up against the slower, more heavily armoured ones. Sometimes there was a refusal to fight, but you would just be jeered on by the other slaves or your manager. Is that the right word? I think I mean master, probably, more likely. They jeer you on with hot metal or leather whips. And one of the more famous times when a refusal to fight happened was in the year 401, when some Germanic prisoners strangled each other in their cells, rather than going out to fight and entertain the Roman people. If you lost a fight but you weren't killed, you could appeal for mercy by dropping everything and raising a finger. But for the winner, it was considered better, or good professional practice, I suppose, to just kill your opponent, because if you spare them, then you might end up just having to fight them again. And if the emperor was there, he would decide the fate. But there was also apparently a referee who could make the final call too, often taking into consideration the way the audience felt and cheered as well. Winners might win the palm branch of victory, a crown, a silver dish of prize money, or, if you survive long enough, your freedom. Now, the thumb thing that we all know from films apparently is an idea that came from a 19th century painting of some Vestal virgins signalling the death of a fallen gladiator with a thumb down. So that's, I think, why we have it the wrong way round now, because actually down meant to spare them, I think. It was known as the pollici verso. I've said that so Britishly, I'm so sorry. But it's not really known which way round it definitely would have been, up or down basically. There are some ancient sources about it, like in the Satires by Juvenal. He says, "These men once were hornblowers who went the round of every provincial show, and whose puffed out cheeks were known in every village. Today they hold shows of their own, and win applause by slaying whomsoever the crowd, with a turn of the thumb, bids them slay." So which way they turned it? I think down? I don't know. Gladiator games or contest came to an official end in the year 404. Emperor Honorius, spelt like Honorius, closed gladiator schools 5 years earlier. But in that year, Telemachus, a monk who had jumped in between 2 gladiators to stop the fight, was stoned to death by the crowd for it. So the official gladiator contests were then banned, even though condemned criminals would still fight wild animals. There's of course famous gladiators too. Spartacus, who led an uprising of gladiators and slaves in 73 BCE in Capua, one of the training schools. I think that was the biggest and the best training school in Rome. He helped 70 others from the training school escape, and they set up first their defensive camp at the base of Mount Vesuvius, and then fled through the countryside, collecting more and more followers on the way north to the Alps, where they actually ended up defeating 4 Roman armies. Not armies, I don't know if it's a legion or not, but they defeated a lot of Romans basically. But rather ridiculously, I think, when one of his friends died in battle, he brought in the old custom of a gladiator fight to celebrate, and had 300 prisoners fight in a gladiator contest. Which seems backwards to me, but there we go. 2 years of revolt later, and Marcus Licinius Crassus squashed the rebellion, with 6,000 prisoners being crucified along the Appian Way. So, should we go on to the characters in the film? We'll start with Marcus Aurelius, and then we have Commodus, Lucilla, and Maximus. The first three, of course, are real people. The last, based on some real people, arguably. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus was the last of the line of emperors of Rome, known as Rome's 5 good emperors, as part of the Nerva-Antonine dynasty. He's famous because of his Stoic philosophy too. The film says he wanted Rome to return to the republic form of government, but there's no real evidence in history that that's what he wanted. Possibly researchers took this as a stretch of the fact that he had his adopted brother and son be co-rulers with him, reflective of the republic run by 2 consuls rather than the empire with 1 emperor. So you can sort of forgive that embellishment, I think. In the film, he also bans the gladiator games in Rome, which he doesn't. But he did ban them in Antioch to punish them for supporting an attempted usurper, the general Gaius Avidius Cassius. The first scene in the film is a battle in Germania as part of the Marcomannic Wars, which did happen, but they continued after he died. He was a beloved and wise emperor, but rather than being killed by his evil son, like he is in the film, he's said to have died from the Antonine Plague that swept Europe at the time. But it was under suspicious circumstances during the war while his son was there. But popular belief is the plague. And so his son, Marcus Aurelius Commodus Antoninus, he didn't murder his father in order to rule. They actually ruled as co-emperors for the last 3 years of Marcus Aurelius's life, as I've already said though. So, controversially, some say that there is historical bias against Commodus because the aristocratic people recording it didn't like him or the way he behaved, especially compared to his father, who was as noble and virtuous as they were. Nevertheless, he seems pretty bizarre, but supposedly the lower class liked him. But he didn't actually care about the people loving him like he does in the film. Actually, he just cared about being a gladiator. In real life, when Marcus Aurelius died, he was towards the end of a war against the Germanic tribes that had been causing problems with the borders and raiding the empire constantly. He was very close to a victory when he died, so he made sure that Commodus agreed to finish the war. But instead, he just decided to give them a peace deal, not what his dad had been fighting for. But it ends the war quickly for him, and then back in Rome he appointed 2 friends, or slaves, to run the empire, so he could train and fight as a gladiator. Just to point out that that's ridiculous, because slaves were killed in those fights for entertainment, so why on earth the emperor wanted to do it and stoop so low? Most people would have said that's bonkers and mad. He basically bankrupts Rome with his constant gladiator games, where he would give his opponents dull swords, but he mostly enjoyed fighting animals, although the human opponents that he did pick were often people that he knew he could kill, or that wouldn't really have much of a fight in them. So he would fight women, disabled people, and mentally ill people. You know, ones that he thought he could easily kill. He wasn't really challenging himself, basically. He'd then often really make them suffer as well, just to show off his skills with a sword. He of course gave himself a massive salary for his appearances in the arena, and came out usually dressed as Mercury, and so would just shoot the animals with his bow and arrow. Sometimes though he would be dressed as Hercules, in god form, of course, claiming to be his descendant and wearing the classic lion skin and carrying a club. During his reign, he changed the name of Rome to Colonia Commodiana, the colony of Commodus. The Senate he called the Commodian Fortunate Senate. He renamed the months of the years after his various different titles, and the people something to do with him as well. So yeah, okay, fair enough. Maybe a little demanding. He even declared himself the new Romulus, the new founder of Rome. So lots of controversies and being a crazy, horrible man later. He left a list of people he wanted to kill on his desk that his mistress found, and it included her, his trainer, and some senators, who decided to kill him instead. So, after being Caesar, or emperor, for 12 years, he's killed in his bath by Narcissus. To follow, in the year 193, would be the year of the 5 emperors, with huge power struggles. So while Rome was safe from one tyrant, it's not really going to go well for them in the future either. It's said that he had planned to kill the consul-elect, due to be sworn in on New Year's Day, on New Year's Eve 192, which was supposedly the final straw, so his mistress and advisor had him killed instead before the celebrations. So he doesn't quite make it to New Year's 193. Otherwise, I suppose that would have been the year of the 5 emperors, wouldn't it, technically? Oh, just also, while we're on emperors, in the newest film, I believe we see Emperor Caracalla, as it's 20 years on from Commodus, but we also see Geta. Again, I've not seen it, so this is from Google and adverts. But from 209 to 211, the two brothers ruled as co-emperors. But to start with, they both ruled jointly with their father, from 198 to 211 too. So hopefully the film's set around those years, basically. The brothers didn't get on though, as you may expect, so when their father Septimus Severus died in 211, they actually formed separate military factions, and Caracalla has Geta murdered by the Praetorian Guard, supposedly in the arms of their mother in her room in the palace. Spoilers for the film? I don't know, maybe. It's not spoilers, it's history. Caracalla is most famous for also not being that nice. He did build the huge baths in Rome and gave Roman citizenship to everyone in the empire, but is one of the more bloodthirsty, tyrannical emperors of Rome. He's not that nice. There's also Lucilla, or Annia Aurelia Galeria Lucilla, and I think she's in the second one because she's the mum of Paul Mescal's character. But in actual history, she was born in the year 150. She's the second daughter of Marcus Aurelius, so the sister of Emperor Commodus. She married Lucius Verus, who was Marcus Aurelius's co-ruler and adopted brother for a little bit. So from 164, when they ruled together, she becomes Augusta, the Empress of Rome. And apparently she quite likes it. I think you would, you'd have every luxury you'd ever need. But Verus dies in 169, and her dad then makes her marry again, this time to Tiberius Claudius Pompeianus in 170. And she was much less impressed with the second marriage, to a man of much less status, but her dad did let her keep the Empress title, so it's not all awful. As did Commodus for a little while when he took over as emperor. But he does get married, so Lucilla loses her money and the lifestyle that she's used to. And I think all that happens before she's even like 30. It's said that as Commodus becomes more corrupt and mad, she realises how much of a threat he is to Rome, and gathered some people to kill him, including her husband and nephew. In the year 181 or 82, she was exiled to Capri, and then executed, after being accused of trying to kill the emperor, which she did. She was part of the plot to assassinate Commodus because he had become utterly terrible, and the nephew who was sent to kill him moved much too slowly and was caught, so that's why they all got killed. Apart from her husband, actually, he somehow escaped it. So yeah, Commodus was responsible for her death, and she wouldn't have been alive in time for Gladiator 2. But who cares? It's a story. It's not claiming historical accuracy. And lastly, we come to Maximus. Of course, it makes sense that the main character was based on Roman generals, because Maximus was a Roman general in the film. And then in the second film, the main guy's his son. It does give us a view of the life of gladiators that people who've seen it and researchers said is kind of accurate lifestyle-wise. Of course, I don't know because I've not seen it, but apparently it draws an accurate-ish depiction, but it's Ridley Scott, so it's more about making a story entertaining, which realistically is fine. They're not claiming to be accurate. If it was a documentary, yes, okay, I'd have an issue with it, but it's a film. It's based on it. It gives you the right vibes of history. It's fine. I feel like I've just mumbled my thoughts there. We'll move on. General Marcus Nonius Macrinus, a real general, a statesman and advisor to Marcus Aurelius, is how the character starts off, and it's said to be the main influence. He had military success against Germanic tribes and was actually apparently a battle companion to Aurelius, serving as consul in the year 154 and proconsul to other parts of the empire several times. But he did die still very wealthy, rather than having to become a gladiator, like in the film. So it starts off based on him, and that's the one that most people agree is the main one. There's also General Avidius Cassius, who was involved in the military campaigns in Germania with Marcus Aurelius, but he declared himself emperor after being wrongly told that Marcus was dead, and was then assassinated by his own soldiers. Apparently the first version of the character was called Narcissus, who was the real-life killer of Commodus. He was a wrestler who strangled him to death in 192. Spartacus, we already know about, was a warrior who was also enslaved, then became a well-known gladiator, and then revolted against Rome. He was a soldier who became a bandit and was then captured and forced into gladiator training, but his revolt lasted 2 years and he was then killed by Crassus, whereas the film's revolt doesn't last that long and Maximus kills Commodus instead of the emperor killing him. There's some people who think he may be based on Cincinnatus, a Roman general who in the 5th century assumed dictatorship of Rome during military crisis, but he then resigned and went back to farming. And he wasn't a gladiator, so... There's also similarities in the story of the conspiracy of Quadrus and Quintianus from 183, a plot against the Emperor Commodus, by some unhappy senators, and they attempted murder in real life in an arena of Commodus by Quintianus, and Maximus kills Commodus in an arena in the film. So that's the similarity there. There's actually so many other generals, emperors, gladiators from the Roman Empire era that the characters' inspirations could have been drawn from. So maybe the film is a good representation of general Roman gladiator history if we don't look too far into it. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. And thank you very much for watching or listening to this very quick little history of gladiators. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, as normal, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're watching, or if you're listening, please do follow the podcast, give it as many stars as you think I deserve, and I think you can comment on podcasts too. So yeah, let me know if you like the film, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.